Most YouTubers film content believing their biggest risk is a bad comment section. But for these 6 creators, routine video production became their final recording session. Each was documenting activities they'd done countless times before. Their own cameras captured the exact moment when familiar content creation turned fatal. It was November 26, 2015, in Dayton, Ohio. Cold Thanksgiving weather pushed many households to use outdoor propane fryers for holiday meals. Warnings about frozen turkeys causing oil boilovers circulated that year, but backyard setups across the neighborhood continued through the afternoon as families prepared their celebrations. Miles Carter, 31, ran a modest, cooking-focused YouTube channel with just over 3,000 subscribers. His videos centered on budget-friendly recipes and introductory cooking tutorials aimed at beginners. For Thanksgiving, he planned a special episode showing how to deep fry a turkey using an inexpensive propane fryer. Footage intended for viewers preparing holiday meals for the first time. Miles frequently filmed from his backyard, using a tripod-mounted camera positioned a few feet from the fryer stand. By midday, Miles had set up his equipment on a level patch of concrete behind his house. The propane burner stood beneath a tall aluminum pot filled with peanut oil. The burner was lit, and the oil gradually reached the recommended frying temperature. His camera documented the setup, including a folding table holding utensils and a 20-pound turkey that had been thawing overnight in cold water. Although the turkey's surface appeared softened, sections near the internal cavities remained partially frozen, a condition not apparent during preparation. At approximately 12:47 p.m., the thermometer clipped to the pot indicated the oil was hot enough for cooking. Miles lifted the turkey with metal hooks attached to a lowering rack. His camera captured him positioning the bird above the pot. As he began lowering it, the camera recorded faint crackling noises as residual ice met the oil's surface. Within seconds, oil surged upward, splashing over the rim and contacting the open propane flame beneath the pot, producing a tall fire column that rose several feet. The flash fire expanded around the pot and extended outward toward Miles. The camera documented an abrupt flare of light as the oil ignited. In the footage, Miles staggered backward, but his clothing ignited in multiple areas. Nearby surfaces, including a plastic container and paper packaging, also caught fire from splattered oil. A next-door neighbor noticed the sudden fireball, followed by dense smoke rising above the fence line. When he checked through the gate, he saw Miles collapsed near the fryer stand with flames still burning around the equipment. He used a garden hose to limit the surrounding fire, while another neighbor contacted 911. The fryer assembly continued burning until the propane tank's valve was manually closed by responding firefighters. Emergency medical crews arrived at 12:58 p.m. They found Miles unresponsive, with extensive thermal injuries to his upper body and signs of smoke inhalation. Advanced life support was initiated, including airway management, but he remained pulseless. He was pronounced dead at 1:14 p.m. on the scene. Miles's camera survived, positioned several feet from the fire. The footage documented his preparation, the rapid ignition sequence, and the moment the oil boiled over. Reviewers later noted that the setup matched the simple tutorial format he used for his cooking channel, where he typically demonstrated basic techniques for his small audience. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be thermal injuries and inhalation of superheated gases. It was November 18th, 2017, in the Wild Cave system near Cookeville, Tennessee. Recent rainfall had destabilized sections of the cave network, with park rangers noting increased rockfall activity. Weather records showed 2.3 inches of rainfall over the previous 48 hours, saturating the limestone formations. Ethan Rodriguez, 25, was a geology graduate student from Nashville who also ran a small YouTube channel focused on educational spelunking and field demonstrations. While he had experience in beginner cave systems, he lacked formal emergency self-rescue training, a gap that would later factor into his situation. His channel had gained modest traction among geology enthusiasts, and recent viewers had requested more footage from tighter, less accessible formations. Ethan's academic advisor had cautioned him against solo cave exploration, but the combined pressure of his thesis deadlines and the need for new on-location material pushed him toward increasingly risky trips. That morning, Ethan carried his standard equipment: a helmet-mounted action camera, an LED headlamp, a basic first aid kit, and an emergency whistle. His plan was to film a section known locally as the Narrows, a tight passage leading to an underground chamber that he intended to feature both in his research notes and in an upcoming upload. Local volunteer cavers had recently advised visitors to avoid confined passages until conditions stabilized, but he proceeded anyway, focused on documenting the formation while the area was still accessible. Despite warnings, Ethan proceeded alone, entering at 9:15 a.m. with an expected return by 3 p.m. The passage required crawling through a space measuring 18 inches high by 24 inches wide. Recent rainfall had made rock surfaces treacherously slippery. His helmet camera documented his progress through increasingly narrow sections. At 11:30 a.m., Ethan successfully navigated the Narrows, reaching the chamber beyond. However, during passage, he inadvertently dislodged several loose rocks destabilized by rainfall. The disturbed stones triggered progressive rockfall that completely blocked his exit route, trapping him in the chamber. His helmet camera recorded 2.5 hours of desperate attempts to clear the blockage, showing him methodically moving individual stones while his situation grew dire. The footage showed him making slower, less coordinated attempts to clear the rocks, with repeated pauses that suggested increasing fatigue as conditions inside the chamber worsened. The final minutes of the recording captured strained breathing and brief, indistinct vocal fragments. Investigators noted that none of the audio contained clear statements, and the footage primarily showed slowing movements as his strength declined. When Ethan failed to return by 5 p.m., park rangers initiated search protocols. Cave rescue teams deployed at 7:30 p.m. with acoustic detection equipment. Teams narrowed his position by identifying a section of the passage where faint scraping noises were intermittently detectable, suggesting movement behind the rockfall. Rescue teams reached his location 14 hours after entry, finding him unconscious with severe hypothermia and dehydration. The cave maintained 48-degree temperature with 95% humidity, conditions that proved lethal, combined with cotton clothing and the inability to access water for over 14 hours. Emergency medical technicians noted no detectable vital signs and classic hypothermia symptoms. Despite 4-hour extraction using specialized equipment, it was too late. The medical examiner determined death resulted from severe hypothermia, complicated by dehydration. It was February 14, 2018, at an abandoned automotive manufacturing plant in Detroit. The complex, shuttered since 1958, had experienced decades of deterioration, accelerated by illegal scavenging operations removing steel beams for scrap metal. Connor Walsh, 24, was a former automotive worker who had developed a popular YouTube channel documenting abandoned industrial sites. His channel attracted over 12,000 subscribers interested in Detroit's industrial decline. Connor typically explored alone with professional camera equipment. His videos combined historical research with exploration footage, making him a respected voice in the urban exploration community. He had previously explored dozens of abandoned sites without incident, building confidence in his ability to assess structural dangers. Connor's growing popularity had led to sponsorship opportunities with outdoor gear companies, adding financial pressure to produce increasingly dramatic content. That afternoon, Connor planned to document the main assembly line area for his automotive history series. The plant featured 1950s industrial architecture, with floors spaced 14 feet apart. The third floor had reinforced concrete slabs supported by steel I-beams every 8 feet. Connor entered through breached security fencing at 2:30 p.m. His camera documented deteriorating conditions as he navigated the first and second floors, capturing remaining machinery and operational evidence. By 4 p.m., he reached the third floor, where scavenging had created dangerous conditions. His tripod-mounted camera, positioned 20 feet away, captured him approaching an area where scavengers had removed one of the primary steel I-beams and partially cut into 2 others, leaving a 24-foot by 12-foot section of slab with severely weakened mid-span support. Connor's footage showed several mid-span cracks and a slight bowing in the 8-inch slab, with small areas exposing corroded reinforcement. The surface looked weakened, but the deeper damage and the unsupported area he later stepped onto was not visible from where he stood. At 4:27 p.m., Connor stepped onto the compromised slab while filming. His tripod-mounted camera, positioned 20 feet away on stable flooring, recorded the moment his weight caused the weakened concrete to flex. A sharp crack followed as existing fractures widened under the load. Within the next second, small fragments of concrete fell through newly opened gaps. The center of the slab shifted downward in an uneven motion, prompting Connor to adjust his footing toward the edge as the surface changed beneath him. The camera's audio then captured a short metallic shearing noise, consistent with internal reinforcement giving way. A sudden drop of several inches disrupted his balance. Dust and loose material slid beneath his boots, making it difficult for him to regain stable footing while the slab continued to deform. Failure occurred an instant later. Intersecting cracks separated the weakened section from the surrounding structure, and it collapsed inward, forming a 12-foot by 8-foot opening. Connor fell through the gap, descending approximately 42 feet to the basement level, where he struck concrete flooring and debris. The camera captured the entire sequence. A neighboring business owner noticed Connor's vehicle parked past sunset, prompting a security guard to check the building. At 6:15 p.m., the guard found the collapsed floor section and Connor's body, then immediately called 911. Fire department crews arrived at 6:28 p.m. and confirmed he had died from obvious injuries sustained in the fall. The medical examiner attributed his death to massive blunt force trauma. His camera equipment survived, showing he had stepped into the weakened area while gathering footage for his channel. It was January 22, 2016, in the backcountry ice climbing area near Ouray, Colorado. Recent temperature swings had left the route with uneven 4 to 6 inch ice and brittle layers beneath the surface. Conditions appeared climbable, but were structurally inconsistent and less stable than typical mid-season ice. Ryan and Kyle Peterson, 23-year-old twin brothers, were experienced ice climbers with 5 years of regular winter climbing. They ran a small but steadily growing instructional YouTube channel that focused on basic ice climbing education. Their content attracted more than 6,000 subscribers, many of whom relied on the brothers' demonstrations for learning proper movement and gear placement. After losing an equipment sponsorship the previous fall, the brothers had been using older hardware, including a 2009 climbing rope and aluminum carabiners that had seen repeated freeze-thaw cycles. Storage conditions and years of use had introduced microscopic fatigue cracks in some components. While they continued to inspect their gear carefully, they understood certain pieces were no longer optimal. Interest from a potential new sponsor influenced their decision to attempt a more difficult route for filming. That afternoon, they planned to climb a formation known locally as the Chandelier. Ice conditions were marginal, but still manageable with cautious technique. Kyle operated the camera and managed Ryan's belay from directly beneath the line of ascent, roughly 10 to 12 feet from the base. Standard positioning for a single belayer setup. They intended to film an instructional breakdown of screw placements and movement efficiency under variable conditions. Ryan led the climb, placing screws at regular intervals. Through the first 60 feet, his technique remained stable, though the ice fractured unpredictably during tool placements. At 3:15 p.m., he reached a crux section approximately 65 feet above the ground and attempted to place a critical screw. The ice at this point was thinner than expected, around 4 inches. He selected a 13-centimeter screw, but it bottomed out on underlying rock after only 3 inches of penetration. Despite incomplete placement, the screw felt firm under moderate testing, a common false sense of stability in thin ice. He clipped into it using an older aluminum carabiner, showing subtle stress lines near the gate hinge. As Ryan began the crux movement, his tools shifted unexpectedly in a brittle patch. A climber on a nearby route later reported hearing a brief vocalization just before Ryan lost his grip. The resulting fall generated a strong dynamic load on the marginal anchor. Under the shock force, the worn carabiner failed at the gate hinge. Metallurgical analysis later confirmed that fatigue cracks from years of cyclic loading had significantly reduced its strength. Ryan fell the full 65 feet. Because Kyle was positioned directly beneath the root in standard belay stance, Ryan's trajectory followed the natural fall line, striking Kyle at head and shoulder level. The impact rendered Kyle unconscious immediately, and knocked him backward onto rocky terrain, causing secondary trauma. A nearby party called 911. Rescue teams arrived at 3:31 p.m. and confirmed Ryan was deceased on scene. Kyle remained unresponsive with severe injuries. Despite rapid helicopter activation and prolonged advanced life support, he was pronounced dead at 4:05 p.m. Their camera equipment survived, documenting the climb, anchor failure, and fatal fall sequence. Footage later showed they had approached the route with the intention of gathering material for upcoming instructional content. Reviewers noted that the increasingly challenging terrain they chose reflected the direction their channel had been moving in recent months. It was April 19, 2017, in Phoenix, Arizona. Afternoon temperatures reached 89 degrees with low humidity, creating ideal pool conditions. A backyard pool in Scottsdale provided the setting for routine filming for a water-based eating challenge channel. Brandon Torres, 26, was a former competitive swimmer who had built a modest YouTube following producing pool-based eating challenges. His channel had grown to just over 4,000 subscribers, and he maintained a reputation for structured safety habits, including rest periods between eating and swimming. He had remained injury-free during 3 years of filming. The episode planned for that afternoon was intended to mark a small milestone for his channel and potentially attract interest from niche food brand sponsors. Recent viewer feedback had encouraged him to attempt more difficult combinations, including faster consumption and reduced recovery intervals. Brandon planned a challenge involving the rapid consumption of 6 hot dogs, followed immediately by an underwater swim sequence. Although he had completed similar challenges involving smaller quantities of food, he had not previously attempted this volume without a rest period. 3 waterproof cameras were positioned around the 8-foot deep end to capture multiple angles. At 3:20 p.m., Brandon began the eating portion. He consumed the hot dogs quickly using rapid swallow techniques common in amateur eating contests. The pace caused him to ingest large pieces of food and significant air. By 3 minutes and 47 seconds, he had finished, faster than his typical pace for similar segments on his channel. Without resting, he moved directly toward the pool. Brandon entered the water with a standard feet-first descent. During the initial swim, his cameras recorded normal propulsion and stable movements. Approximately 30 seconds later, footage showed a sudden change in his coordination. The combination of incomplete swallowing, retained food in the upper airway, and swimming-induced abdominal pressure triggered an involuntary cough reflex as he attempted to rise for a breath. The reflex forced him to gasp underwater, drawing pool water into his airway. This combination of water aspiration and partial obstruction from food fragments caused immediate respiratory distress. Camera footage captured his swimming efficiency deteriorating. His movements became uncoordinated as airway obstruction, aspiration, and panic impaired his ability to reach the surface. Attempts to lift his head resulted in additional water entering his airway. His arms and legs moved irregularly as oxygen deprivation progressed. Within moments, his motions weakened and became disorganized. Neighbor Jennifer Martinez, a registered nurse, heard irregular, disrupted splashing at approximately 3:25 p.m. The noise stopped abruptly. When she looked over her fence, she saw Brandon floating face down and motionless. She entered the yard, retrieved him from the water, and began chest compressions and rescue breathing after determining he had no pulse. At 3:33 p.m., fire department paramedics arrived to find Brandon unresponsive, pulseless, and cyanotic. During emergency airway management, clinicians noted food material and water obstructing his upper airway, consistent with aspiration during submersion. Advanced life support was administered for 34 minutes, but he remained in cardiac arrest. He was pronounced dead at 4:07 p.m. Brandon's waterproof cameras survived the incident. The recovered footage documented the eating segment, the abrupt onset of distress in the water, and the sequence leading to his submersion. The medical examiner determined drowning with aspiration of food material and pool water as the cause of death. It was August 15, 2015, in Omaha, Nebraska. Severe thunderstorm warnings were issued beginning at 4:30 p.m., with forecasters noting atmospheric instability capable of producing frequent cloud-to-ground lightning. local power companies advised residents to unplug electronics due to expected voltage spikes during the storm. Ashley Johnson, 29, was a former television meteorologist who had shifted to independent weather documentation after leaving broadcast work. Her small but dedicated YouTube channel, with just over 5,000 subscribers, focused on educational breakdowns of severe weather events. Viewers appreciated her calm, data-driven explanations and her habit of demonstrating real-time monitoring using inexpensive home equipment. The developing storm provided an opportunity for her ongoing series about electrical activity during thunderstorms, subjects she rarely had the chance to record from home. Ashley monitored storms from her covered back porch, where she kept consumer-grade weather instruments, including a handheld anemometer, digital pressure sensor, and temperature logger. The equipment was plugged into outdoor outlets using standard household extension cords and lacked grounding appropriate for instruments exposed to electrical surges. The porch's metal roof and steel support posts formed a conductive structure connected to her home's wiring through the outlet circuit. By early evening, lightning frequency increased within a few miles of her neighborhood. Power grid monitoring later confirmed unstable voltage beginning at 6:15 p.m. Ashley prepared her recording setup. Her main camera remained indoors, facing the patio door, while she worked with the instruments outside. Her footage showed her explaining barometric pressure changes and rising wind gusts as the storm intensified. At 6:28 p.m., she made adjustments to the anemometer housing while commenting on the storm's acceleration in flashes and thunder intervals. The rapidly increasing electrical activity placed her equipment at elevated risk, although nothing in her setup visually indicated imminent danger. At 6:30 p.m., a high-energy lightning strike hit a distribution line roughly 180 yards from her home. The strike caused a significant power surge that moved through the grid and into residential circuits across the block. When the surge reached Ashley's outlet, the ungrounded metal housing of her weather instruments became energized. Ashley was holding the metal casing with one hand, while her other hand rested lightly against the metal porch post for balance. The surge transferred into the device and through her hand, producing a powerful shock. The current passed from the instrument, through her arm and upper torso, and into the metallic post she was touching. The conduction pathway disrupted her heart's electrical system almost immediately, inducing ventricular fibrillation. There were no outward arcs or explosive flashes, just a brief, sharp electrical event, followed by her sudden collapse on the porch. Neighbor Robert Johnson saw lights flicker across several homes and noticed Ashley fall backward onto the porch floor. When he checked on her moments later, he found her unresponsive near the weather equipment, which showed signs of localized heat damage and melted plastic around the plug connection. He called 911 and began chest compressions after confirming she had no pulse. Paramedics arrived at 6:39 p.m. and found Ashley in cardiac arrest with contact burns consistent with electrical conduction through the hands and upper body. Despite 31 minutes of advanced life support, she remained in ventricular fibrillation and was pronounced dead at 7:10 p.m. Her indoor camera survived, recording her data collection and the brief moment preceding the electrical event. Reviewers later noted that she had been gathering footage for an upcoming educational segment on thunderstorm electricity, material intended for her small but growing channel. The medical examiner confirmed death due to cardiac arrest from electrical shock. Electrical analysis showed that the weather instruments had lacked proper grounding required by code. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.